Welcome to Alief Voices in Actions and welcome to this special episode on Women's History Month. I am Alba Gutierrez and today I'm with my coworkers.
Hi, my name is Cassandra Martinez. I'm also an intern in Alief Voices in Action, and I'm also joined with.
My name is Miriam Malata. I'm also a intern here, and I'm a junior at Hastings High.
And I am very happy to be here with such lovely, intelligent, outspoken, well spoken, career oriented young ladies. My name is Dr. Paula Pineda, or Dr. P as my students call me. I am a lecturer at the University of Houston in the Department of Political Science. And for my full time job, I also work with Harris County at the Department of Economic Equity and Opportunity, where we make federal investments into our workforce and our small business community here in Harris County.
Okay, so to begin, I have a question for you, Dr. Pineda. And what was the first thing that inspired you to empower under-resourced communities?
That's a great question. I believe in equity, right? So I believe that most people, virtually all people, would love the opportunity and the dignity that comes with being able to secure a job,
Right.
to provide for themselves and to provide for their families. And most of the time, if that's not happening, it's because the opportunity is not there. So I'm very passionate about filling those gaps, and that looks like providing assistance to people who, for example, fall through the gaps of maybe not going to college, but looking for other alternative pathways into careers and what those are, or also small business owners, especially women business owners that are
Right.
so strong and very dominant in our community, but sometimes are under-resourced.
Right. And while working, have you faced any troubles or issues due to being a woman?
Well, uh, I've had some challenges that I think maybe were because I am a lady. For example, early in my career, I was a very young professional because I went straight through from undergrad to law school to master's to PhD. And I would go to like some meetings sometimes. I remember
Right.
one in particular where I said, okay, I'm here. And the colleague that knew me said, okay, Dr. Pineda's here. And the gentleman that we were meeting with was like, oh, you're Dr. Pineda? And just looked me up and down. And I'm like, well, what did you think I was? Like Dr. Pineda's assistant or scheduler or umbrella holder or what? I'm Dr. P. And so that was a little uncomfortable to sometimes think maybe people have ideas about who I am or who I should be or who they expect me to be when they only see the name. I've also been in meetings where, and I have to say, this is not the majority, okay?
Right.
The majority, I have been treated with the utmost respect by people of all genders. But I do recall one meeting where there was a very, very much older gentleman. And it was about a project that I led. And so, of course, I needed to speak on it. But every time I spoke, he would just not listen to me or not acknowledge me or actually not even make eye contact with me. And so I'm really thankful for my supervisor at the time, who was a man. And that's the whole point of all this. It takes both genders to advance women's issues. And he would steer the meeting back to me and say, well, let's hear what Dr. P thinks. And so he really did me that great service, that great empowerment to literally give me the mic when someone was a little bit hesitant. So those are two isolated incidents. Other than that, I think day after day, I've been treated respectfully in general.
Miriam, would you like to talk on the historical foundation?
Yes. So, before moving into women's politics today, I kind of want us to go back and just look at where we all started, like what got us here. I like to start with the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848 that was led by Elizabeth Stanton and Lucretia Mott. And what I found really powerful was how they created the Declaration of Sentiments, which was kind of modeled after the Declaration of Independence. And it just really, they made it more inclusive, and they really made it clear that all women and men were created as equals. And I wanted a question for you. I just wanted to ask you, what did you think about the demands of women at the time, and how do you see that reflect?
Okay, Miss History. That's a good one. So, yeah, I think the first thing to note there is, like you said, the declaration, right? The first thing is you actually need to make demands. And that's very important, and you need to enumerate those. And so, with those demands and declarations, beginning with men and women are created equal, which for us seems very duh, but at that time was rather revolutionary. They also enumerated what they need. That's why I always tell ladies, tell people what you need, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they said, we need to be able to vote.
Mm-hmm.
They said, we need to be able to own property, because at one point, uh, ladies couldn't, right? We need to have rights legally over our own paychecks. Y'all work?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Imagine if you had to hand over your whole paycheck to your husband.
Hours of working.
Yeah.
No.
So, and who knows? You might, get married and work something out. Y'all have a joint account, but y'all know the difference and the distinction between having to turn it over and having the right to your own money that you earned yourself at your job, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so those were the types of demands that they made at the time. And of course, the primary one was voting, which we got. However, it was not immediate, as history shows. So where we are today, I think, is with lots of great advancements on those fronts. Yes, we can own property now. Yes, we don't have to turn over our paychecks, but also with much work still yet to do.
That, like, I think that because of like all these protests and all the, like you said, like all the actions that were taken for these demands, I feel like it's so nice to see how it's reflected now in all the opportunities that we have as women. And it makes me really happy to see women who are really successful and empowered, because it's like, I feel like sometimes maybe girls or little girls, maybe they grow up in like environments where they think they can't or aren't able to, but in today's century, like I truly think that anything is possible, and I love seeing people look up to those women, because it's proof that we've gotten and that we can get there and continue to get.
Absolutely. That's why they say representation matters, right? I have to see a lady astronaut to think, oh, I could do that too.
I really think that like it also has a role in like making families like stronger. Like I feel like there would have been some sort of resentment in families, like if
Reach.
you weren't able to, vote and stuff like that. So I'm pretty sure like things with siblings, husbands and wives, like they're equal now. They don't feel like one is doing more.
I love that. Well, I'm kind of a newlywed still. I'm a year in, almost a year in, and yeah, my husband would say, "Happy wife, happy life," right? So, absolutely. Imagine if day by day you're over here handing over your paycheck, can't buy properties, can't make a business and pursue your dreams, right? Alongside other facets of your personality and your identity, like motherhood and whatnot. Of course. And then resentment is not cute. It's not fun. Not a nice feeling.
Mhm.
And what do we know about it? It grows. So, yeah, I think it impacts the whole family, and that's a great point.
And then touching up on the voting aspect, you did say it took a really long time. It actually took 70 years before the 19th Amendment came into place and was ratified by like the Constitution and let women vote. But it still wasn't like it still didn't make things as equal, because one, like black women still weren't able to vote because of the
Poll
poll
taxes.
taxes
Yeah.
and the literacy tests and stuff. Native American women, they also weren't seen as citizens until like 1924. Asian American women's, like, they also had problems with citizenship issues, and then Latino women faced discrimination. So it wasn't really until like the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that voting rights were more fully protected.
Yeah. Yes, Queen. Tell
They
them.
take a long
I
time.
mean, and that's why it's also important when we talk about women that women are not all one homogenous thing, right? Black women had some struggles, Latin women had some struggles, and different identities as well. And so when we try to move forward, we have to think, well, is this moving forward for all of us or just some of us? And then how do we rectify that?
Question:
Yeah.
for some women that like political history that you think made a difference, someone that you really admire for what they
Well, I think there's lots. I mean, we just talked about the whole voter movement, suffragettes. Um, so I think, ladies like that really pursued something that didn't even exist, and that probably lots of people scoffed at and laughed at the time, are very notable. I think we have, I don't know by name, but we do know in political science research that when we have more ladies serving as congresswomen, and this is a global statistic, so serving in parliaments around the world, and wherever in parliaments they serve more, then the more the policies that are being generated by those parliaments and those congresses and those legislative bodies help women with their issues. So, for example, things like maternity leave, uh, having maybe now because I'm pregnant, it's all coming to me, but like lactation rooms and the rights surrounding maternity things, all the way down to pay equity and pay disparity, which we still have hovering continuously for around 70 cents and upward, maybe sometimes 75 cents to an hour, to an hour, to a dollar, to every man's dollar, right? And so I think there's historic women, and then there's also everyday women that decide I'm going to post my salary, because when I start to post my salary and make information public, then we can start comparing and we can start putting pressure on systems, right? And so I think it takes all ladies kind of being the heroes of their own lives
Yeah.
and standing up for themselves first. And usually in doing that, you help others.
You see these opportunities and, like you said, like the growth of like women, how much women make, and like decisions. How do you see that in your everyday life or even at your work?
So that's a complex problem. So one is perception and then the other one is data, right? So when it comes to perception, we know that the research shows when women are good leaders, which means that they go after the deal, they're good at negotiating, maybe they're very firm. And I know this because the research says it, but also because I've dealt with it as someone that goes after it at work. You can be labeled as aggressive. But if it was a man undertaking those same types of positions, they are not labeled as aggressive. They are labeled as good leaders, right? And so I really point to the research. There's Professor Iris, excuse me, Bonet at Harvard, and she looks a lot into this, and also like the likability. Like women also for leadership need to be likable, and it's just like, what are these standards, just for leadership, that women have to also prove themselves for leadership on past successes, whereas men usually are hired or promoted based on potential. So all these like small tiny things that add up, and I say that to say because that also contributes to the pay gap, right? Because we have just less women in leadership because of all these obstacles. And then another aspect of it, going back to we can be the heroes of our own destiny, is women are also socialized to not negotiate for their salaries as much as men are. And so, for example, with my littlest sister, I always talk to her when she gets a new job offer. I'm like, did you negotiate? Did you negotiate? Because women are a little bit more likely to not negotiate because they're just like, oh, I'm just grateful I got the job, right? But we all know if you negotiate and you say, well, I was looking for something along the range of this to that, what's the worst thing that can happen? They'll just say no. That's it, So there's no need to fear. But that hesitation to negotiate also adds to the pay gap. And so what I'm trying to point out to here is that it's we say multivariate equation that leads to that pay gap. And a final factor in is it that it's women enter the labor force maybe at more similar wages, but since more men are propelled into leadership, their salaries may take off more, and women stay a little bit far behind. let alone, leaving to go have kids and all that stuff. So maybe I rambled a little bit, but we were talking about pay disparity and how that's still an issue and what are the factors that lead to it, right? So, okay.
Yeah. However, I also feel like a lot of women are, I would say, afraid of standing up for themselves or like afraid to speak up because they feel like it takes like a leader to do it. Like it takes like you have to be naturally born with those qualities in order to do it. When I believe that like no, those are things that you learn along the way. However, there's not a lot of like motivation out there, I would say, for that. That's why as I was coming here, I was thinking about like who is a woman who I truly admire, and I was thinking Dolores Huerta because she wasn't like the most outspoken person out there. Like she wasn't like she's not really known. Like when you think about like women who have made a change, like you usually think about other women, not really Dolores Huerta. You usually think Cesar Chavez, like with
Yeah.
the farmers. But no, she was still able to make a change. So I feel like, yeah.
And very recently, she just used her voice.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
She's
And
we,
she
oh
had to
yeah.
overcome fear, right?
Yeah.
So, no, that's a great point. Speaking up and trying to push behind fear. And my students would say, here she goes again about growth mindset, but it's true. We can learn anything. The research shows we can learn. Some people may label you, or you may have labeled yourself as shy or as not good at math or whatever it is. But the research shows if you literally put the time into it and you decide to practice and you're like, I'm not going to be shy anymore. I'm going to practice public speaking in a very committed way, right? Not like
Right.
30 minutes on a Friday. I'm talking about a serious commitment. But when you put that work in, you literally can become not shy. You can
Right.
become a good speaker. So, absolutely, no excuses. You got to go for it.
I was like, because a recent thing that happened, because in my physics class, my teacher, she came up to me because she said she noticed how, like, every time I try to speak to her, I always apologize for trying to get her attention. I apologize for, like, just literally everything.
Existing.
Yes, and she told me, she said that, like, it's not just me, like, a lot of girls, like, even for, like, the most basic things, like, we apologize. And I just found that kind of sad because I don't even know when I developed, like,
Yeah.
this kind of, like, just this fear of like
Habit.
existing. Yes,
Yeah.
like, I didn't even know.
Well, kudos to that teacher. What a great thing to point out so you can work on it.
Personally, like she's someone I really look up to a lot. She's always taught me since I was little. She's always like, ask questions, ask this, like, and like you said, like, what's the worst that they can say? Like, no, and it's okay, like, move on. And I feel like at the same, like, growing up like that, I usually am someone who asks a lot of questions about something that I'm like interested in or something that I want to know. And I was like being ahead of things because I feel like I'm kind of setting myself up, a good, like, reputation, a good profile for myself. And there's been times where sometimes I've encountered like teachers, even other women, like teachers who are women, and they're always like, oh, like, you're like asking too
You're
much,
too
yeah,
much.
you're too ahead, or you don't have to do this. It's good enough if you just do this. But it's like I don't like. Why would I have to settle for good enough? And I feel like I would. I feel like I'd really appreciate to be heard more, and being appreciated for asking things. And I feel like even like people in general, like getting those responses, I feel like that's kind of what kind of backtracks you, and then you're like, okay, I guess maybe I should stop asking questions, but that's not really how it should be.
No, don't let it shape you. I'm sorry you had that experience. As an educator, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, keep asking your questions.
Also, this is kind of like a personal question, but like, what inspired you to be an educator? Because I'm on that field too. I want to be a teacher. So, what inspired you to be an educator? Yeah.
So I love students, and
Right.
I also loved school, like since kindergarten to all the many, many years of school that I did. And so when I got my PhD, I knew that I wanted to work in government and use my own research and apply my own research. But I also knew that, of course, I still very much love academic settings. And so I launched my career in government. I stayed on top of the research. Sometimes I would edit, an academic journal article or something just to stay in the loop a little bit. And then a couple years ago, I believe 2 or 3 years ago, since I kept in touch with my own department at the University of Houston. Woo! Um, I was extended the opportunity to teach a class, and they said, well, look, you're someone who's working in government. You might have really good insights for our students. Would you like to, teach a course? And I said, I would love to, and it's one of the biggest joys of my life. And what I want to stress about that is I'm not a full-time professor, right? I have a whole nother career. And I feel that for me, this is such a good fit because I get kind of the joy of teaching and connecting with my students, but only one class and not with like a huge research load or anything like that. So I was able to straddle both.
Touching on in our internship, our civic engagement, Alief Voices in Action, that's kind of one of our goals is to have educate and kind of support girls and young girls, women, and even people in general to use their voice and advocate for what they need, want, demands. And we've done that by hosting events, and whether it's for voting or whether it's informational, like our last podcast where we talked about knowing your rights, all of those kind of things. Is the whole point is to try and empower people to not be afraid of using their voices, being scared. And I think that today it's really important to, even especially as a woman, to really stand up for ourselves and use our voices whenever we need.
And that requires emotional intelligence, right? We have to say, hey, self, hey, queen, what do I need? What do I want? What am I feeling? And then you can go and then pursue and communicate externally.
Touching up on the fact that a lot of women right now, they're pushing forward with political rights and stuff. So I'd like to shout out some girls at our school that are very productive.
Ooh.
That do a lot. We see them, we see you guys. So I'd like to shout out Azima Sadiq, Miss Gomez, and Mariela Alvarado.
Nice.
We've noticed them doing a lot around the school, and we think they deserve to get shouted out.
Love that. I'd love to see a lady celebrating other ladies.
And I'd also like to shout out our listeners, for engaging and just letting us speak up about topics like this, because it's important that, voices are heard and things like this are brushed up on, because we don't hear them as much as we should, and people usually don't have enough information and things like that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pineda. Dr. Pineda, right? Yeah,
Yes.
Dr. Pineda for coming in, and see you guys next time.
Bye.
This has been an AMP production.